I'm Sarah Garrett. I'm founder of Investing in Ethnicity. For those who don't know much about our initiative, we started off 5 years ago, asking why ethnicity hadn't had a place at the table, and it's actually informed by roundtable discussions by various employers that we came to the conclusion of doing a matrix to get everyone on the same page and working together to progress the agenda and looking at what best practice looks like. And that's what today's session's about, because we're relaunching it today. But before we go into the matrix, I wanted to just introduce two of our speakers. Last year, we also won the Ethnicity Awards, and the maturity matrix feeds into that. So our outstanding employer of the year was Lloyds Banking Group last year, and we're lucky enough to have two representatives who are going to give us some really key tips and tricks around how we can really progress this agenda, so we get it right. I'm now going to hand over to Philippa, Bird and Destiny Onwuachi from Lloyds Banking Group.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that really kind introduction, and for inviting us to speak at the launch of the 2021 Maturity Matrix. Really, really cool to be here today. I hope that everyone's all right. So my colleague Destiny and I are really delighted to spend some time with you this afternoon on behalf of Lloyds Banking Group, where we work. And while we're really, really proud to have been chosen as the Outstanding Employer Award winner in 2018 and 2020, we've got so much to do, like a lot of you. But we do have a solid plan that's moving forward at pace. We're making progress against our goals. We're really committed to seeing through what we know to be right for our staff, our customers, and all those communities that we want to help, especially through this recovery period, which is going to be really tough for lots of people. So we're really grateful, actually, for the matrix that Investing in Ethnicity provides. I think it's a really easy to use tool. It's a simple way to plan, measure and track improvements as we move this important work forward. And as we've developed our own ethnicity strategy over the past couple of years, we found it a really good framework to hang our activity on as we sort of move along and it all shapes up. So when the events of last summer hit, the racial justice movement became something that none of our organisations could ignore anymore. So we needed to not just pay attention, but to act. And with the matrix, we had quite a good foundation on which to launch our programme of work, which we called the Race Action Plan. So we launched that in July 2020. I mean, of course, this is a really, really interesting few weeks to be working in race, with the publication of that race report, and now the result of the trial surrounding the murder that spurred us into action last July. Personally, got a lot of mixed emotions today. Parts of me want to celebrate the result of the trial. The result was definitely a step in the right direction, but it was just one trial. People worldwide are still subject to that emotional and physical violence due to the colour of their skin and the systems that hold them down in society, schools and at work. That's why we're here, right? So this acceleration of our ethnicity strategy via our Race Action Plan is what we'll be sharing around today. We'd love to hear back from you later on in terms of what's been working in your organisations if we have time, or you can connect with us on LinkedIn. And also we'd like to know like some of the things that you're trying out, maybe we can learn from you as well. In terms of delivering our plans, Destiny and I are 2/3 of a small, but we would say perfectly formed Race Action Plan team, along with Camille, who is lurking around somewhere today. So hi, Camille, if you're out there. We're very much a specialist function who sit within Group I&D at the centre of the group. Crucially, and perhaps one of the most important things we want to get across today, is that in an organisation that's the shape and size of ours, we cannot and are not doing all this work alone. So we've got over 65,000 staff at the group. In reality, the plan is being delivered by an entire network of bought-in passionate people. So hard at work right across the group, which includes brands like MBNA, Halifax, Lloyds Bank, Bank of Scotland, Lex Autoleaf and Schroeder's Investment, a number of partners, divisional I&D leads, several collaborators, and what we like to call our co-conspirators, pushing things forward, side of desk and often unpaid. We also add to this list of people who we couldn't do this work without our fast growing advocate group, our employee resource groups and advisory panel chapters. Destiny's going to tell you more about those. They're not just useful, but essential for reaching into the corners of such a big organisation. So you're going to hear from Destiny in just a moment about how important this group of people are to us in terms of the continuous feedback loop that shapes our activities as it moves forward. But first, a little from me, just about what the Race Action Plan is and what it isn't. So why don't we start with what it isn't? So the Race Action Plan is not a programme designed to fix people who haven't been able to progress under their own steam. The action plan isn't activity curated to raise capabilities or upskill. We're not trying to fit our colleagues into a broken system. In fact, it's the converse. So what we're doing is improving that system so that it works for absolutely everyone. We know that we're taking on a lot by saying that, but we're really committed to addressing many of the issues that stem from societal and structural inequality. And of course, these issues are mirrored in the workplace. There is no point even starting to deny it. They're in our systems and they're in the way we make decisions. And that is what the Race Action Plan is going to fix. So our plan is a recognition of those structural flaws in play and a sometimes harsh spotlight, an uncomfortable spotlight on the decision-making processes that we know we need to make more sense if we're really going to help all of Britain prosper, which is our core value as a group. And when we talk about prospering, that could be our people inside, our customers, or our investment clients. So when we announced our Race Action Plan, it was with a clear statement of intent that we are an anti-racist organisation and that we stand against all forms of discrimination. In a logistical sense, the Race Action Plan is a number of signature actions set around 12 different work streams. At 4 o'clock on, is it Wednesday today? On a Wednesday afternoon, you'll be really pleased to know that I'm not actually going to talk through our entire 12 work streams in any detail. What I will do before Destiny takes over is fill you in on some of the things that we like to call our 3 strategic pillars, and the work streams do fall under these. If for no other reason than to give you some idea of how our collective brains around the organisation have shaped our work. So 3 strategic pillars. Firstly, culture. We need to improve our culture. We can do all the targeted attraction, structural reviews and data crunching we want. If the culture sucks for people from underrepresented backgrounds, they won't stick around to be part of those diverse, innovative teams that we know can elevate our products and services and better help our customers. Without a culture you feel safe in, you simply can't do your best work, especially now. So I don't need to tell all of you today that the pandemic has been the truest test of organisational culture that we hope we'll face in this generation. So after that massive disruption to business models, furloughs, job losses, and reorgs to ensure survival of companies, what actually remains? Like, who are we after all that? Are we less or are we more inclusive than we were before? What's the impact of more home working or socially distanced offices, bank branches on inclusive culture? It's actually a really, really good time, as busy as we are, to interrogate and test how different groups feel, and also to think about the impacts of new ways of working on those groups. We can't wait for everything to go back to how it was, because we know it probably won't. We're in a new environment and we know things we didn't know before. This is an opportunity for change and embedding new inclusive behaviours if ever there was one. The second pillar of our action plan I want to mention is progression. So tackling inequalities in progression and the processes around it, with a specific focus for us on Black talent who seem to hit the old glass ceiling and concrete walls more than any other group. A data-informed, question-led approach is a really, really good start. So where is this happening? Why is this happening? At what volume? Let's see the figures. At what point in our process do we need to make the changes to put things right? So through our process reviews that we're doing and forensic examination of the employee lifecycle, we're getting a really good idea of where more inclusive performance management, for example, and decision makings around delegation, opportunities for growth can really make that difference. So teams across the organisation are setting out new guidelines, tightening policies in order to achieve more equitable outcomes. And for us, it's really needed. So perhaps the most talked about area of our plan that gets the most attention, certainly internally, is our published goal of increasing our Black representation at senior levels. So when we launched our plan last summer, the figure of Black representation in our F grade and above, so our senior managers, was at 0.6%, far below the national figure of 3%. Frankly, embarrassing, right? We want to get this figure from 0.6% to 3% by the end of 2025. We want the ambitious and brilliant men and women who say to us, I've never seen a leader who looks like me, to get there on our watch. And there's always debate around targets and how effective they are, but something to aim for and communicate clearly is always a good thing, in my opinion, if you have that all crucial senior buy-in to own the numbers and the outcomes. The business really needs to own the targets, not the D&I team, for them to be effective, we think. And sometimes that might mean divisional iterations or geographical nuance if your offices are spread across the country, but targets or goals can be an effective motivator. The third pillar I want to mention, my final pillar, is recruitment. So making it inclusive, making recruitment inclusive. And again, when we look across the group and the numbers coming in, we see that our Black representation is not enough. It's at 1.5 versus 3% nationwide. Of course, we're really proud to have been the first FTSE 100 company to have set public goals to increase Black, Asian and minority ethnic representation back in 2018. But now we're looking closer at our figures, like a lot of you. So in short, we're taking BAME apart, and we've reached our more nuanced conclusions around the difference in experience between groups. It's been a wake-up call. So those are 3 areas of improvement that all the work we're doing seeks to address across our 12 work streams. So culture, progression, and recruitment. So how do we get there, and what actually works? So now we're a bit into this stuff, we thought it would be really useful to share with you today just a couple of areas that we consider are having the most impact on the success and the wider momentum of the action plan. So they are our new approach to listening and our group race education strategy, which is changing our culture, not just through the training content itself, but in other quite surprising ways. I'm going to hand over to Destiny for more on this.
Thanks so much, Philippa. And hi everyone, and excuse the background noise. I'm in the centre of London where everybody wants to rev their engines. But yeah, so in a human sense, the Race Action Plan is here to make things right. It's supposed to be a day-to-day experience and encapsulate the day-to-day experience of our employees who have felt previously excluded by the thing that we like to call cultural fit, or the elimination of microaggressive behavioural patterns that have been endured and have caused damage to the confidence and ability to thrive. So we're now a lot more aware of our people's varied experiences because we've learned to listen. And one thing that my mum always used to say growing up is that I need to listen to understand as opposed to listen just to respond. I was always really quick-witted, just thinking, yeah, what's next to say? But it was just like, no, calm down, listen to understand what I'm saying. And this is, quite frankly, the approach that the bank has taken. So while the data is important, we found out that the lived experience and the honest reflections on what it's like to be Black or Asian or Jewish at Lloyds Banking Group are just as crucial to understand. So last year prompted a lot of listening and reflection, and we discovered, and what we discovered shaped our ethnicity strategy going forward. So in the past, we hosted Ask Me Anything sessions where colleagues were asked questions of senior leadership, but now it's been flipped to sessions that are called Tell Me Anything sessions, where the goal is to create a safe space for colleagues to feel empowered and to raise concerns and issues. So we've done both of these openly as well as anonymously to give encouragement to colleagues to come forward and to share their honest views and feedback. And this has enabled senior management to better understand the barriers and the changes faced to take action. So we continue to undertake regular listening sessions to understand real life experiences and progresses against our own plans. So we're always interested to know how our people view work, what we're doing, and if they feel that the momentum is being kept up or not. So last year in June and in September, hundreds of colleagues of Black heritage shared their experiences and views through these virtual focus groups. The outcome of the first group back in June, shortly after the death of George Floyd, literally fed directly into building this race action plan. And the second group in September enabled us to continue these conversations, check on our momentum, see how it was being received, and to further hone in on our priorities. So we're going to keep listening. And as these sessions are very invaluable to us in terms of shaping our direction and assigning resource to the activities accordingly. So we've also introduced frequent race action bulletins for the whole organization. So it's not just targeted to our specialist groups, it's available to all. So following the feedback, we now keep the whole organization up to date with the bi-monthly open calls in a press conference style, where our team and internal partners share progress against the race action plan and signpost upcoming activity. They're well attended, which is good, and are a chance for our people to ask questions and at times add useful challenge to direction and momentum. So perhaps one of the more focused ways to listen through our amazing, is through our amazing race advisory panel. So these were set up soon after the plan was established and consists of 23 colleagues of Black, Asian, and ethnic minority heritage who influence and inform our ongoing ethnicity strategy to keep our eye on the progress. Discussions center around current priorities and are always lively and informed. They're also, again, a safe space to challenge, as we don't always get things right within our organizations. We can never always get it right, so it's often very good to get the feedback and the challenge. The monthly forums are also a great chance to hear how the activity is landing in various parts of the organization. So the representation that we have on the panel is from every division and has a really great mix of different grades. So where people sit within the organizational structure in terms of influence and position, as well as their ethnicities, their religion, and their professional background. So there's another key role that is played by what we call our employee networks. And we have a strong ethnicity network called REACH, which connects, supports, and develops colleagues from a range of ethnic and cultural backgrounds, with membership open to all colleagues. So it's not just strictly for colleagues that are from a certain background, it's literally open to everybody. So at present, the network has over 4,000 members, which is absolutely amazing, which also includes advocates. And the volume of advocates has grown by circa 40% since 2020. So you can tell that what has happened in the world has literally helped people want to get involved and want to become allies, as well as the evolving of the race action plan announced back in 2020. So this is all a part of our master plan. The regular events and the monitoring of these workshops for Black, Asian, and minority ethnic colleagues are definitely making a difference to our colleagues. But the network as a whole is a great sounding board to ensure our plans are actually making a difference. So what I want to call out here in terms of impact on the progress against our goals is the huge rise in advocacy. As I've already said, it's grown by circa 40% in less than a year. And the related activity which brings in the massive numbers. So the events, the debates, and the moments to connect with the plan really help the collaboration stay alive. All the individuals and groups that I've mentioned have been absolutely instrumental. There's no denying it. And they've been very essential to our rollout of the plan from a central position. So as well as listening to them, remember what I said about listening to understand and not just to respond, as I used to do when I was a little bit more immature. They are our eyes and our ears, and they let us know what's happening. So they also let us know what's missing and how everything is landing. And it's a continuous feedback loop that we really couldn't do without. So the advisory panel and the advocates in particular have been immense champions for one of the priorities of the Race Action Plan that Philippa, I'm going to bounce back to you to talk about, which is our huge and very comprehensive race education program. So Philippa, back to you.
Thank you. So right from the start, we knew that our group race education program was something we need to deliver boldly and quickly if we were going to be able to create any kind of culture change. Pretty soon after we announced the plan, we started delivery, and we delivered workshops for 4,200 senior managers and leaders in the second half of last year. At the same time, we were in development, and then in November, we launched deep dive race, culture, ethnicity and religion training for specialist people-facing teams, which we'll tell you more about in a minute. On March the 1st this year, we launched what we call the Juggernaut, our biggest workshop so far, which is a live virtual offer for line managers, shaped around the needs identified through our insights. So we had 3 needs we identified for line managers, which were awareness, empathy, and the tools to take action. So far, just check the figures, 8,000 line managers have enrolled on workshops, and they run Monday to Friday through the week, and they're running till the end of the summer. The take up has been absolutely massive, and the training partners that we use are actually quite shocked that we've managed to get people to sign up to something that you normally have to push them into. The other thing I'd like to add is that we thought long and hard about mandatory versus non-mandatory, and we decided to make this course non-mandatory. And considering that we have 8,500 line managers and 8,000 have already signed up without being pushed to do so, I think speaks a lot about the engagement we did around the plan. On the same day that we launched the Race Education for Line Manager program, so March the 1st, we also launched an internal website called The Race Space. See what we did there? And it's for everybody, and it hosts original anti-racist resources, as well as a whole load of training collateral, team discussion guides, articles, and basically help around certain topics that we've been asked for. For example, how do I spot microaggressions? How do I deal with them? How do I talk to my kids about race? It's also the first port of call for everybody who goes to training. So after they go to training, they're sent to the race space to pick up their handouts and their homework. And while they're there, they look around, see what else is to offer, and take it back to their teams. And we'll continue to develop it throughout the year, depending on what people are asking for. And so while race education for line managers is rolling out, we're not putting our feet up, we're also developing another 2 programs. So one for all of our colleagues at all levels. So we're looking at, delivering to, 55, 60,000 there. And then another offer for our very senior leaders, basically our managers, if you like. So they need something different than our managers. All of our training has been developed in collaboration with external experts and consultants, and the content is shaped according to need and heavily influenced by the race advisory panels. And we do believe that it is industry leading in scope and scale. And because it's so bold, it's got potential for great impact. And now we've finished our specialist teams training that I mentioned before, which was developed for our people-facing teams such as recruitment, conduct, comms, HR. We've had a little time to reflect on the impact of that program. And also we've gone through a lot of the feedback that people have sent us. Destiny, Camille and I worked really closely on the delivery with an external consultant. And I must say, it really was a journey from start to finish. Destiny, would you like to share a little bit more about how the training landed with you, and also how it impacted on the white colleagues who attended?
Absolutely. So I just concur that the specialist training was definitely a journey for all of those that came on it. For a start, it was long. It lasted 6 hours. So we started at 10 a.m. and we ended at 4 p.m. Although I will say that not one person was like watching the clock and counting down the hours, because it was very encapsulated and very, 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 very shocking in terms of the types of information that we went through. And it was very emotional. And that's why I think that it worked. For me as a Black woman, it was emotional from a different lens, more so because I experienced a lot of the things that we were talking about through the training, which included backing up my experiences with statistics and data. So it felt more real for me because not only have I been living this, there's data to back up my lived experience, which often grated on me as I sat through the training. But I did feel that because of the greater good, it was important for me to sit on the training and be able to give some impact in terms of my own life experiences and bring some of these things to life. And that's not to say that it fell any shorter on our white colleagues or our non-ethnically diverse colleagues. It's literally felt the same, and it impacted our colleagues in terms of their feedback. It was shocking, they didn't realize. And I found it very encouraging to see that that moment where you see their faces and you see that they've actually got it, like the penny dropped, and it was like a light bulb moment that moved people from simply being a bystander to an ally, which I thought was completely amazing. And the other thing that really worked, that was called out through the feedback that we received, was the fact that, again, it showed us the data and the facts that set the scene and connected the dots between the structural racism in society and how it literally follows Black and Asian people through early childhood education and ultimately rather into the workplace. And I think that that's a very important call out, because we've got two main groups of people from the feedback as well as just in life generally. And some people are not as emotionally evoked. So you can't just give them lived experiences and then that's going to move them. Oftentimes you need the data to back it up in order for them to be able to really rationalize and understand the systemic racism being talked about. So you have your more so your quantitative data type people that need to know the numbers, and then you have your qualitative type people that need to feel the emotion and really understand it from that emotive perspective. So I guess you can call them the heart and the head kind of people. But each session was also slightly tweaked to take into account the team that was attending, so that the learning can be applied practically. So everybody got homework, so it didn't just stop after the first 6 hours. So it was actually given so that people can create their own action plan, and literally the 6 hours was just the beginning of their own personal and professional journey. So there were lots of follow-up work happening in the back of the training that the teams attended. And one of these things is called, what we like to call, the next step sessions. And we're happy to help those who need it. But we were encouraged that many felt empowered to be able to step up and move things forward themselves with the new knowledge that they gained and the confidence that it literally gave them. And people are applying what they know to the way that they work. And this literally becomes their new BAU, which is, again, ultimately what we want to see via the plan. And this, again, is really the only way that we'll get things done if the change making is widely owned and the behavioural change is embedded. So of course, there are many other things happening that I'm sure a lot of you will be thinking of, such as the introduction of diverse shortlists and the waiver process and executive appointments to ensure that these include at least one Black, Asian or minority ethnic candidate. But we've also launched a brilliant new talent identification program for our Black senior managers, which helps us to identify our next leaders and directors. And this program is already bearing amazing results, which is amazing, quite frankly. So these are just some of the many things that we're doing or have done to undertake the 3 strategic pillars. And I'll just remind you of them. They were culture, progression, and recruitment. And our biggest challenge is to ensure that we continue to maintain where possible, to maintain and where possible to increase the momentum behind our initiatives. Because there's so much activity happening, hopefully you've been able to pick out a few of the things that we've mentioned on the call today. and some of the useful elements that we've got going on, whether it's the importance of a wide network of doers and champions, including advocates and allies, the benefit of continuous listening and feedback, so being open to listen, to understand, and not just to listen to get your response in, or the delivery of the bold learning programs to increase the empathy and confidence of our colleagues. So as I've said, there really does need to be a mixture in that of qualitative and quantitative elements. So I guess in conclusion, it's also very important to remember that change does not happen overnight. We wish it did, but it's never been the case anywhere in life. And it probably, won't start with where we are within our own organizations. But even though this is true, it can and it will happen. If you have the desire, you have the drive, you have the dedication, and you also have the resources in place, it's definitely possible. So yes, that concludes our lengthy summary of what we've been doing within Lloyds. And apologies, I'm not able to look at you because I ain't reading my notes anymore. But I know that after I hand back over, we're going to be able to stay around and answer some Q&A if you guys have any. So yeah, I will hand back over. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a bit, and you can see why Lloyds Banking Group are outstanding employer, because they have literally done so much stuff, and they've really accelerated that over the last year as well. So, and a lot of the points as well we've fed into the maturity matrix. So thanks for helping consult on that as well. So the relaunch of the ethnicity maturity matrix, it's been now 3 years old, so this would be its 4th year. Essentially, it hasn't changed a huge amount on what it set out to do in the beginning, and that was based on consultations with employers around what was needed, and it was around these things. It was around bringing together some strategy and a framework of best practice recommendations that employers were seeing that were working in their workplaces, and bringing people together. So as was mentioned earlier, it's not about 1 or 2 people within an organization changing culture and pushing uphill. It's about getting different people on board who are really passionate about driving the agenda, but then running it through the whole fabric of business. So the matrix is a great way to get everyone on the same page. The second thing is measuring success, and Lloyds Banking Group they're founding partners. They've been working with us for the last 5 years, and we've been working with them. And we see that with all our members, that it's a 2-way process. We see what's working for them, what's changing in a positive way and embedding sustainable change. But also we share that knowledge with everyone else and the rest of our membership. And everyone's doing something well, so like there's always something to share. Thirdly, the matrix provides accreditation and a report on the back of it, which if anyone who fills it out will get feedback on what's different areas of the matrix, and we're going to come to that in a second, and areas which organisations are doing well against the average scores of everyone that's submitted. But also the submissions go into you don't just get accredited for which level you reach, you also, the top 10 employers would go into the Ethnicity Awards as well. And finally, and I think most important for this year, we're all at risk of burnout at the moment, I'm guessing. And one of the things that actually we've stuck with is the time efficiency of the matrix. And we think if you know what's happening within your organization, it just takes 60 minutes to fill in. We've kept it really simple. We don't want you to supply lots of evidence, but we can ask for case studies and stuff that can be shared. And as mentioned, the top 10 employers go into the Ethnicity Awards and determine the winners. And also worth mentioning is the maturity matrix is backed by Parliament through the all-party parliamentary group. So you're probably wondering what's changed in the last 3 years. We've got 6 sections of the matrix, and largely they're pretty much the same. The first section is leadership and commitment, so that's organisational commitment. and we've now, as a differentiated by splitting each of these sections into subcategories as well. So if you look each section, so leadership and commitment are under the categories of exec sponsor, resourcing, visibility, strategy, and understanding. And we're going to come on to the others shortly. So within leadership and commitment, we have executive sponsor, which will look at areas and recommendations such as speaking opportunities and visibility, meetings with the network on that side. So here I've just put an example on one of the points and recommendations in the matrix, and it's so simple to fill in because you've either done the recommendation or you haven't, so or you've planned it. So it's really easy and quick to fill in. So the other side, leadership and commitment, resourcing. So it's looking at budgeting and dedicated staff, and that includes things like ring-fenced budgets, making sure you've got dedicated diversity and inclusion representatives, and as Lloyds mentioned, they've got a dedicated team that are focused on ethnicity, but also ensuring that there's some form that team can feed into board level as well. Leadership and commitment, visibility looks at comms, CEOs, participation as well. So an example of that could be quarterly communications to all colleagues, updating on progress of the ethnicity agenda. It can be from the exec sponsor or a suitable board representative. And then a big subcategory for us is strategy. It looks at building an ethnicity task force, the people that are passionate and the stakeholders about driving change, setting aspirational targets as part of strategy, and addressing areas of representation, which very much depend on data. I'm just going to race through these, but understanding looks at listening sessions, which is it's a big part that we've seen a lot of organisations do this year. And I know Lloyds mentioned it, and they call them Tell Me Anything sessions, and we've seen those have worked really well. Reciprocal mentoring and inclusive leadership training. And as you can see, there's some examples there as well. And then finally, the SIP subcategory for this section is accountability. So it's bringing in KPIs, like responsibilities around representation, filling the gaps, looking at role models, role modeling inclusive behaviours, and that side of it as well. So one of the examples is business leaders can cascade to their business lines their own inclusion commitments, which cover specific ethnicity commitments annually. And when you see the maturity matrix, there's a set of different recommendations aligned to each subcategory. And the guidance notes look similar to this, and we'll be sending these to everyone on this call. So you've got the recommendations, and there's guidance notes attached to each recommendation. So this is within the subcategory of accountability. And then there's a level, which we have a starting point level, basic, advanced, and outstanding, which gives an indication of how difficult that is on that journey. And then the tags at the end is a new addition that we've added, which gives the ability to see who owns that recommendation, who's involved in it, and what other areas that it might link to, so that you can quickly pull out different areas within the whole of the matrix. So going on to the next section, which is policy and data. It's a big area which we've been looking at over the last few years based on ethnicity pay reporting. The policy and data side, I'm just going to put all of this up, looks at subcategories of policy, so bullying and harassment, training for managers around policy, data capture, so categories, disclosure rates, and stages of recruitment. And a new subcategory, we've looked more intensively into reporting, so annual reporting and ethnicity pay gap as well. And some examples there for you, include having policy to allow holidays. Obviously, it's about checking back on all your policy and interrogating it to make sure it aligns with any recent changes. Around data, it's having a detailed comms plan. We've heard from a lot of organisations that disclosure rates have been challenging, and it's making sure that you have consistent communications, but you're also communicating the right content around why you're collecting the data for transparency. Another example is to use HR data to manually monitor hiring, progression, and attrition rates, which is a more advanced level recommendation. And then third section on this, I'm going to open up for questions afterwards. I'm just conscious of getting through this for time. And the first section is on culture and inclusion. And there's 3 main sections which look at visibility, recruitment, and understanding. And if I pull these up. So within visibility, it looks at communications, storytelling, and making sure you've got the correct resources that are available for especially line managers when they need them in the moment. Recruitment looks at inclusive recruitment in this section, but we'll go on to recruitment later on around employee life cycle. But in making sure that you have the right sort of questions when you're interviewing, like around inclusion, and also your onboarding includes making sure that you're communicating your company's values and your policies around ethnicity. And then finally, we've got understanding, which includes inclusion training, managers, especially line managers, and allyship as well, which I know Lloyds mentioned quite a lot of work they're doing around that and to change culture within their organisation. And that's quite a key part. The 4th section is network group. And network group has subcategories included, which include strategy, events, engagement, business, external. This year, we've found that network groups have had a lot of onus placed on them to deliver around like what's happened, and there's been a lot more appetite for the wider organisation to understand around ethnicity and race. So we have included a bit more around that and a bit more guidance around employee resource groups this year, particularly how to look back at your strategy and revise, but also around recognition as well of some of that work that's been done and how pivotal some ERGs are, employee resource groups are, and how they are influencing business, particularly based on this year's events. So some examples of network group there for you as well. Yeah, so some examples would include running an annual survey, which we found is particularly useful, particularly because of a lot of organisations have had to deal with change in this year. So seeing how, feeding back to the business, how their membership is feeling about different aspects and change. Developing a programme of events that help allies. We found allyship there's been a lot more appetite, and most network groups we've spoken to have reported there's been an uptake in allies on their membership and more engagement. So it's making sure you've got quite good allies program, communication, and ways of engaging allies. Have a communication plan. Another example is have a communication plan and share an update on ethnicity news with network members on a quarterly basis. Other examples, so these are examples that link with it, or then within the business, an example is around network can help any business communications relating to ethnicity or the wider ethnicity agenda. And then the new category we've got is more around external work. So collaborating with other organisations or helping charities or schools, for example, externally, and working around that. And then the final, and I know the second final penultimate category is employee life cycle. This looks at the process of the employee's journey around attraction, selection, recruitment, retention, and progression. And I'll just give you some quick examples of that. So attraction examples are using imagery and language within recruitment campaigns, but it's looking at how you can attract a broader candidate pool. Selection looks at like interview panel bias, having diverse panels and blind CVs. Recruitment looks at representation, recruitment agencies, so making sure like your data is tracking your recruitment process at each stage and interrogating that if there's any areas where you're losing a diverse pool of candidates. And retention is around measuring representation and creating interventions where you're finding around data that your attrition rates are lower, but also reinforcing around listening sessions as well, and their importance to understand where it is and some of those interventions, why it is that things are happening and how we can maybe improve. And then finally, progression, looking at talent programs, succession planning, and monitoring. So one of the recommendations is around identifying top ethnically diverse talents at all levels and placing them on dedicated career or talent programs. But there's also areas around sponsorship and things that we've seen work around that as well. And then finally, and then I'm going to open up for questions as well after I've just explained the scoring side. The final section, which is a new section, which has been introduced, is external impact, because we've seen organisations now on their journey doing much better than when we started the matrix 4 years ago. So we're now seeing organisations get to a point where they can sort of start influencing outwards. And that's within clients, customers, community, and beyond that as well. So external impact looks at supply chain, visibility, activities, and customer and clients. So around supply chain, for example, policy, an example of that is partner with suppliers to promote better ethnic diversity, but also obviously supply chain includes revisiting your policies if you have one around making sure it's inclusive. Visibility includes comms, social media, online press, and CEO and board. An example of that is using social media, but it's also how you utilize CEO and board around visibility and how you're coming out what you're doing as an organization. Activities include partnerships, early careers, so work with schools, charities, and also activities externally that you can do from a CSR point of view and support you can give externally. And then customer and clients, and I know it's mentioned by Lloyds Banking as well, that they were looking at all the customer and client facing people and looking at training around that side as well, and giving awareness training to customer and client facing employees. So that's a bit of an overview of the categories, very speedily gone through. The levels of maturity, we have like each recommendation is worth a point. There are 150 points altogether recommendations, but as we said, it's basically a yes, no, or a planned event. Like on each recommendation, you just need to answer it with yes, no, or planned. So we recommend that you have the right people in the room answering the questions on the virtual room, and you can get the matrix done relatively quickly, and people have reported back that they've managed to get it done in 60 minutes. So the scoring, that gives you an idea of the scoring for this year. And the levels are employer, star employer, advanced, and exemplary. So it's just an illustration. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I just wondered, based on all of the, especially having Lloyds Banking Group here, are there any questions that people have either about strategy, about the maturity matrix, or any other areas to do with the ethnicity agenda, or things that they're finding, or how you're feeling today? I did want to ask a question actually, because what we've heard from some organisations is that reverse and reciprocal mentoring isn't as effective as, say, the Tell Me Anything sessions that you do with executives. Have you found that's replaced it, or are you still using that reciprocal mentoring? Because we've heard that it's a lot of onus to put on one person to actually explain to execs what the whole ethnicity lived experience looks like within that organisation.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing both. We're still doing both. And different divisions do reverse mentoring in different ways. So some it's time limited, so it runs for a year. Others it runs longer. Others it's part of a wider sort of development program. To be fair, I've only heard positive outcomes from reverse mentoring at Lloyds Banking Group, where I worked before. It wasn't the same. Mm-hmm.
Do you need like quite a robust structural program behind it?
I think you do. I think you can't just set it up, matchmake people, and expect it just to work. I think there has to be a little bit of coaching on both sides, expectations set out, and objectives really, and then just a bit of help in terms of, so how often do you want to meet? So I don't think you can just leave people to it. I think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's quite a good addition to the Tell Me Anything sessions.
Yeah, I would definitely do it in combination with, because there's a level of a rapport that you can build between the two people that, that are in the mentoring situation together, that you wouldn't be able to build in a Tell Me Anything sessions. And sometimes that level of rapport can actually drive a lot more challenge, as well as a safe space. For the person to be a lot more honest as well. So I think they both work hand in hand.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah.
So someone's asked, actually HSBC have said as well that it's worked. They've had good feedback from their reverse or reciprocal mentoring. Someone asked, what are the costs of the maturity matrix? The maturity matrix is actually a free tool that a lot of organizations use. It's free to download. You just need to register online. And a lot of organizations use it as a framework to inform their strategy. There's no cost attached to it, and you can submit it and you will receive a report. If you are a member of Invest in Ethnicity, then you will receive a more fuller report, which looks at more comparisons and drills down into the data a bit more, and also helps you with next steps as well. So hopefully that answers that. And I've got another comment as well on chat saying we are taking time to prepare mentors to help them through it. It's been a positive experience, and that's from Network Row. It's a nice comment. Has anyone got any questions around anything they're finding that's working and not working, or any questions about the maturity matrix particularly? It was a bit of a whistle-stop tour.
I can see that there's a question on the chat from a lady called Diane Daly. And she was asking, she was saying that the training sounds super impactful, and she would like to hear a little bit more about this training. Is that possible? So I will go into, sorry, I'm like an old woman coming close to read. Yeah, okay. So in terms of the training, we had two different trainings. We've got the race education training, which is for all of our line managers, which myself and Philippa went into a little bit more detail about. But we had the specialist training where we had an external person come in and take us through the 6 hours, which was specified to what we classified as specialist teams. So people that would make certain decisions. So like, for example, our speak up team. So if there was a situation where a colleague wanted to whistle blow or speak up or raise a concern, we need people to understand what could drive that, as well as the types of outcomes that we need to see, because a lot of those, the data showed that a lot of those people that did speak up, it didn't necessarily be upheld, and some of them should have been upheld if there was just a little bit more understanding. So I think somebody was asking about cost, but I think that would be between yourselves and and the person providing the information.
A question that's come through is, have you put a target against every strategy to understand effectiveness? And if so, what timescale are you using to determine success or not success, as the case may be?
So yeah, we've got measurements and tracking against the action plan. We're being quite boring and doing sort of annual for like our overall tracking, and then obviously we've got 2025 as our target, as our goal that we're looking to for our 3% for Black senior representation. In terms of the sort of annual tracking that we're doing, so we launched the plan last July, so this July we're going to be looking at a number of markers. So some of them will be around promotions, attrition, recruitment. We're also going a bit more granular, so looking at different groups in terms of attraction, like who's making it through the application like what that kind of employee life cycle at that end of things as well. We are really keen to sort of match this up with other data, such as with our CEA, so our colleague engagement scores. So we're going to be tracking, we started tracking sort of the experience in terms of being line managed for Black, Asian and ethnic minority colleagues. So what is their experience being line managed, being performance managed? So we're looking at that as well. We're going to be repeating the same Tell Me Anything sessions with some of the same markers. So, you know, around how, I think, what was the one that I really want to track year on year? I think it's, Black colleagues, do you perceive LBG as an employer of choice? And that was really, really low last July. Like, it's so low that I'm too embarrassed to even say what the number is, but we'd hope that by July, that perception of LBG as an employer of choice would have actually gone up through the work we're doing, the communications we're doing. And then we're also doing sort of roundtable interviews, so a bit more nuanced focus group stuff as well. So we're pulling in data that other people are doing as part of, you know, CEA scores and sentiment scores, and then sort of matching that to our recruitment, hiring statistics, just sort of the usual MI as well.
Yeah, and in addition to that, so we're doing it on a divisional level as well. So looking at like progress against, you know, recruitment, attrition on a divisional level, because different divisions tend to have more representation than others within the bank structure. So being able to do that kind of puts these divisions, you know, on front line to say, okay, what are you doing to be more diverse within your own divisional line? So I think that that's also very important to track against in terms of KPIs.
Got time for one more question. I just wanted to get a quick one in. How does your race action plan align to the plan of other groups, like your wider EDI strategy?
In terms of like, how does it compare to our wider like I&D strategy for the whole group? Is that the question?
So how does it align to your wider inclusion strategy?
Yeah, so before the action plan was launched, we were moving to more of an like all-inclusive type strategy, but then obviously on a bit like in a lot of places. So our strategy has actually sort of reshaped slightly, and race is a priority now. So it's one of our 4 priorities going forward into the year. And to be like, in terms of like resource, in terms of sort of where it sits in order of the attention paid to it, and you know, reporting into exec and stuff like that, it's up there. You know, the issue around this is that it feels like other things have to give. So there is a bit of a tension. Sort of we're being really careful to make sure that other things don't slip. So when we look at, for example, sort of in this recovery period, the effect on gender and ambition, we want to make sure that we're not sort of missing, because we're focusing so much on race, we're not missing the fact that women who have been put into these caring positions are actually losing their ambition, losing their drive, and are not applying for things. So we're keeping a close eye. I think a lot of that is around just keeping your sort of external insights, you're scanning, just finding out what other people are focusing on. But yeah, I think the strategy has sort of reshaped around this for a little while, and now it's settling down into something that feels quite workable.
Yeah, I think in terms of most organizations, and Sarah, I think you said it as well, that there wasn't an ethnicity lens a lot, you know, like 5 years ago when you came to put this amazing thing together. So in a very similar way, there wasn't really a race lens before, you know, the events of last year. And now I'm finding myself, Philippa, Camille, are being brought into so many different parts of the bank to actually give that race lens, especially where it comes to the culture of the bank. So while we're not, you know, saying, you know, other parts of EDI are going to be taken away from so we can focus, we're literally just adding what should have already been a layer on these different parts of EDI.
Fantastic. And we've literally at 5 o'clock. That's gone so fast, and thank you so much. Because so, like, imagine if you did all this work within your organisation, you could be here next year telling us all the work you're doing as well. So, what we're going to do is we're launching the packs and all of the information on the maturity matrix tomorrow. And we will send everyone who's on this call information of how you can register and how you can submit the matrix and all the recommendations. We're also nominating as well for the Ethnicity Awards, which has business categories as well. So we will send you through some information on that as well. But if you have any questions about the membership or the allies work we do, etc., then please do get in touch with Margaret at spmgroup.co.uk. So it's Margaret at spmgroup.co.uk. I think you'll find her email on the website. All I've got to say now is thank you so much for all your input, and it sounds like Lloyds are doing some great stuff, and it's great that we've seen you from the outset on that journey as well for all the work you've been doing in the background.
Can I just add, I know that we didn't get to go through all of the questions, so I know between myself, Philippa, Camille, link in with us on LinkedIn, and maybe we can continue to keep the dialogue, because we can also learn from what you guys are doing within your own organisations as well.
I think that's the beauty. That is the beauty of it, isn't it? This is one thing we can't be in competition on. We've got to collaborate to move forward.
Exactly.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for joining in the afternoon. We will be in touch with more details around the maturity matrix. Any questions, do get in touch with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.